Anakin intervened at the decisive moment, and Mace Windu fell, thrown by the storm of lightning reflected from the shattered window. The post-shock silence vibrated in the Chancellor's room as Anakin, panting, realized he had crossed a line. He fell to his knees by choice and by guilt, promising to serve to save Padme. And Palpatine leaned in, smiling. In the blink of an eye, Mustafar. The river of lava, the fury, the encounter with Obi-Wan, Padme fallen in tears. You are breaking my heart, and the blue blade trembling between love and accusation. The duel stretched out like an endless corridor, the pride, the mistake of the jump, the fire that licked the remains of the hero. As it burned, a buzzing sound opened in the air like a tear in reality. In a breath, everything was pulled back, and he was once again on his knees before the Chancellor, as if hell had been a dream that smelled of ashes. "What's going on?" Anakin whispered, feeling the ashes still in his throat. His eyes burning with a heat that the cold room could not explain. The shadows in the office on Coruscant seemed out of place, as if the furniture had its own memories of what he had just experienced. Palpatine's hand hovered, paternal and predatory, as if he had been expecting the question. The hum of the repulsors in the distance sounded identical to the moment before the disaster, a soundtrack of repeated destiny. Anakin touched the floor with his fingers, seeking tactile certainty, and realized that not only did he still have his limbs, but his skin was unburned. But the smell of smoke lingered, like a secret that time could not hide. "Rise, my young friend," said Palpatine, his voice woven with promises. "From now on, your name will be Darth Vader." The syllables fell like chains, and Anakin felt each link close around his breath. A reflection crossed his mind. Obi-Wan's face at the edge of the river of lava, his eyes moist, his cry of ancient pain. "Obi-Wan," he whispered, not as a plea, but as a blade. The Chancellor raised an eyebrow, satisfied. Anger was the ideal cement for the new temple of obedience. "Leave the past, my disciple," Palpatine advised. "The future your wife deserves requires sacrifice." Mustafar again, as if the planet had waited for him with the patience of a predator. "You did this to yourself," Obi-Wan shouted, and the sparks from the platform fell in identical spirals, repeating choreography that Anakin recognized in his bones. "I hated you," Anakin retorted, realizing he had chosen words he didn't remember saying in that way. The Force seemed to warn him of small cracks in the script of reality, as if an invisible director were offering him improvisations. Still, the weight of jealousy knocked down any possibility of reconciliation, and the sabers sang the same refrain. When the fight reached the cliff, he did not jump to solid ground. He retreated, calculating another approach, trying not to give up his flank. "I have the advantage, Anakin," Obi-Wan warned. "Don't try it." Anakin tried to redirect to find a circular path, a passage through the unstable rock, but the platform gave way. The kinematics of fate took cruel shortcuts. His foot slipped, the saber went off axis, and Obi-Wan's blade cut low, rendering his leg useless. He fell closer to the fire than before, sliding down a slope of ash, and the heat reached him with even greater fury. "You were my brother," Obi-Wan shouted, and Anakin already knew the pain contained in that tone. The sulfur-laden wind blew the same sparks as always, but he noticed a new detail, a double echo, as if the world repeated the words with a millisecond delay. He tried to grab a rock, failed, and the Red River approached with the inexorability of guilt. "I hate you," Anakin heard himself say, and that phrase in that second cycle weighed like a sentence against himself. The fire embraced his body, and his flesh screamed with a voice his mind wished it didn't recognize. This time there was no immediate blackout. Consciousness clung to every burning second. He smelled iron, not only from the lava, but from his own vaporous blood. He felt his skin crackle like wood bursting in a fire. "Anakin," Obi-Wan called one last time, hesitantly, and stepped back. Choosing life over mercy, he did not know how to give. The world vibrated, alternating orange glow with black spots, and Anakin noticed the shadow of a ship descending. Palpatine was coming like a knight that promises rest and delivers nightmares. "My master," he thought, and the words sounded to his own ears like the sound of chains being tightened. Palpatine walked among the ashes with the confidence of someone who had made a deal with fate. "He still lives," he told the guards, and his words brought a chill that no embers could dispel. The old man knelt, brought his fingers close to Anakin's scorched face, and whispered, "You have suffered, my apprentice, but your pain will be the mortar of the new empire." Anakin tried to respond, but his lungs let out a raw sound. "Help him." Droids descended, stretchers slid in, the ship swallowed him up. Mustafar remained outside, like a dog that knows its master will return to feed it. On the cruiser, the operating table looked like an altar for renunciation. "Prepare the implants," said the Chancellor, and the drills began to sing like metallic mosquitoes. The anesthesia was merciful, but intermittent, as if the Force itself prevented him from sleeping, wanting him to remember. In flashes, Anakin saw mechanical hands sewing tubes, his chest being molded by strokes of fate, ribs counted as state property. The mask, suspended, awaited its new life as if it were the shell of an ownerless predator. "You will be reborn," Palpatine promised, "and everything you love will be preserved in the regime we will create." The first breath inside the helmet came like a force-corrected error. The air entered filtered, each cycle a reminder that the body now obeyed other laws. Anakin, Vader, rose with difficulty, feeling the weight of the armor like a verdict. "Where is Padme?" the modulated voice asked, unexpectedly fragile behind the base. Palpatine turned slowly, as if appreciating the architecture of tragedy. "In your anger, you killed her." The sentence fell like ice in the desert, and for a second everything was too quiet, as if the galaxy had stopped to listen to what was coming. The scream rose through the tube in his chest, passed through the filters, and came out in mechanical waves, a pain that no chamber could contain. The walls shook, droids recoiled, and Palpatine closed his eyes in quiet satisfaction, reaping the fruits of devastation. At the height of this cry, something broke in the invisible ceiling of time, and the light from the Chancellor's office on Coruscant flooded his vision again. He was kneeling again, without burns, without a mask, without the weight, but with the incandescent memory. The roar turned into a human sigh, a choked question that couldn't find enough air. The room was the same, the smell was the same, the promise was the same, but he was no longer the same. He realized that the bond of destiny had shifted, no longer hatred for Obi-Wan, but the decision to break the cycle for her, signaling that from then on everything would revolve around his love. Then he whispered, "Padme." Anakin opened his eyes again before the Chancellor, but this time his mouth did not call for Obi-Wan. The whisper was different, soft and urgent. "Padme?" Palpatine reached out his hand as before, ready to utter the name that would imprison him, but Anakin did not wait. He stood up firmly, ignoring the call and the weight of that room. The echoes of the Force still pulsed in his mind, warning him that repeated mistakes would always lead him to the flames of Mustafar. He didn't need to repeat the script. He had found a loophole. He hurried through the corridors of Coruscant, his cloak fluttering behind him, his heart beating as if time itself were trying to catch up with him. He felt the guards' eyes on him, but none dared to stop him. Palpatine called him on the communicator, promising power, eternal life, and control over death, but Anakin turned off the device. His feet guided him by instinct, and each step was a refusal of the fate that had consumed him in cycles. When he reached the door to Padme's quarters, he hesitated for just a moment, fearing he would find emptiness. When he opened it, there she was, confused and alarmed. Padme stood up when she saw him, holding her belly carefully. "Anakin, what's going on? Where have you been?" Her voice mixed relief and fear, and he quickly approached her, hugging her tightly and taking her hands. "There's no time for explanations. We need to leave now, before it's too late." She searched his eyes for some clarity, but found only the determination of someone carrying memories she couldn't understand. "Trust me, Padme," he pleaded, and there was truth in that plea. For the first time, it wasn't power that drove him, but the need to protect her. While Padme got ready, Anakin closed the curtains on the window and activated the escape protocols. The Force told him that every second was precious, that Palpatine already sensed her absence. Padme wanted answers. What about the Senate? What about the Republic? What have you done? He took a deep breath and replied, None of that matters anymore. They will try to use us, Padme. If we stay, we will lose everything. She looked at the man she loved and realized there was something different about his posture. He was no longer the impetuous young man, nor the vain warrior, but someone who had seen the end and returned to rewrite it. The private hangar was still guarded, but Anakin knew shortcuts that would allow them to escape without raising immediate alarms. With Padme at his side, he made his way to the ship. The silence of dawn on Coruscant hung heavy, as if the city's towers were watching this betrayal of destiny. As he started the engines, he felt the Force vibrate differently, almost as if the universe itself had held its breath. He knew Palpatine had already noticed his escape, but he didn't care. The future of his family was above any promise made in desperation. The ship rose into the night sky, leaving behind the political heart of the galaxy. Padme held his hand, her eyes brimming with uncertainty. Let's go to Naboo. No one will think to look for us there right away. I know the lakes, I know the gardens. We can hide until the winds change. The words brought comfort, but also a twinge of fear. Anakin didn't know how long the cycle would allow him before pulling him back. But seeing Padme there beside him, he decided to believe that this time could be different. The landing on Naboo brought a sense of relief that Anakin hadn't felt in a long time. The fresh air, the absence of the constant buzz of the city, the peace of the green fields, everything seemed like a balm for his troubled mind. Padme took a deep breath, feeling the native air like a reunion with her own essence. Here, maybe we can have a chance, she said. Anakin looked at the horizon and replied, This is where we start over. No longer as soldiers, no longer as pieces in someone else's game, but as a family. Those words sounded strange even to him, but they carried sincerity. In the early days of their refuge, they found shelter in an old country house that Padme knew. There, far from the immediate reach of war, they were able to rest. Anakin remained alert, sensing the Force whispering that the cycle had not been broken, only delayed. Still, he savored every moment. The sound of Padme's voice, the touch of her hand, the life growing inside her. If it's a boy, I want to name him Luke, she said one night, and he smiled, letting himself be lulled by the idea of a future where that name would not be marked by tragedy. Meanwhile, on Coruscant, Palpatine plotted in fury. He has strayed, he muttered to himself, summoning loyal senators and trusted generals. Anakin's disappearance threatened his plans to consolidate the Empire. But Palpatine was patient. He knew that the Force worked in patterns, and no deviation could last forever. He will return to me, he said confidently, as if he had seen the cycle repeat itself 1,000 times. However, for the first time, there was uncertainty in his vision. Anakin's choice to seek out Padme was a new variable. On Naboo, the simple life began to rekindle memories of youth for Padme. She walked through the gardens, touched the flowers, remembered the lake where they fell in love. Anakin watched her, torn between peace and fear. Each of her laughs was a victory against fate, but each shadow in the sky made him hold his lightsaber hidden. "Don't you trust that we're free?" she asked one afternoon. He replied, "I don't know if we are, but I know that as long as we're together, nothing else matters." It was a promise, but also a confession that the bond of time could pull him away at any moment. One night, Anakin dreamed of fire again. Mustafar called to him, repeating the condemnation of other cycles. He woke up sweating, but as he looked at Padme sleeping beside him, he felt something different. She was his anchor, the fixed point amid the waves of time. "I won't let this happen again," he whispered, kissing her forehead. The Force seemed to watch silently, without intervening, as if waiting to see how far the Chosen One would take that decision. For the first time, Anakin believed he could cheat fate. The time on Naboo strengthened not only the bond between them, but also the hope that perhaps they could raise their children far from the war. Anakin, however, remained constantly vigilant, training in secret, trying to understand how to break out of a cycle that always brought him back to the same point. Padme, for her part, insisted on reminding him to live in the present, to cherish every breath. "Maybe that's what the Force wants from us," she said one morning. "Not war, not power, but just love." He listened to her in silence, and for a moment he believed her. However, Palpatine's whisper echoed in his mind, distant but insistent. "You will come back to me, no matter how far you run." Anakin closed his eyes, trying to block out that presence. But he knew that the cycle would not be defeated by running away alone. Still, each day spent with Padme gave him strength. If he was trapped in a destiny that always returned to the same point, perhaps he could use that time to find a way out. And on Naboo, hidden among fields and lakes, he began to believe that saving Padme was the key to his freedom. Padme noticed the constant tension on his face and called him over. "Anakin, I don't know what's going on inside you, but I know you're struggling with something bigger than the two of us. I just want you to know that I'm here. I always will be." He hugged her tightly, closing his eyes. "It's for you that I fight, for you and for our children. No matter how many times I have to try." The stars of Naboo shone above them, silent witnesses to a choice that might finally break the cycle. Time passed on Naboo with a mixture of peace and expectation. Padme, surrounded by Anakin's affection, prepared for the most important moment of her life, the birth of her children. Anakin never left her side, making sure that nothing threatened the safety of that makeshift home. When the time came, the pains of labor overwhelmed her, but unlike previous cycles, this time he was there, holding her hand, offering her strength. "I'm here, Padme. I won't leave you alone." His words were like a shield, and with each contraction, the bond between them grew even stronger. The Naboo doctors worked delicately, and amid tears of pain and hope, two cries broke the silence of the house. A boy and a girl. Padme, exhausted, lifted them tenderly, and tears streamed down Anakin's face. "Luke, Leia," she said in a trembling voice, and he kissed her forehead. For the first time, the chosen one felt whole. "You survived, Padme. We did it." Her eyes filled with light when she heard that, for the promise of death that had hung over them had been broken. In the days that followed, the little house on Naboo was filled with soft laughter, baby cries, and renewed hope. Anakin helped with everything, whether it was warming the sheets or rocking the twins in his strong arms, trembling with emotion. Padme smiled when she saw him, transformed into a devoted father. "You were born for this," she said, caressing his face. He replied, "Not to be a warrior, not to be a puppet, to be theirs." The silence of that night on Naboo seemed to confirm that fate could finally be different. But the shadow that haunted the galaxy would soon find them. One afternoon, as Anakin watched Padme walk through the gardens with their children in her arms, a suffocating presence fell over the house. The skies darkened with the arrival of a ship. Palpatine, wrapped in his black cloak, emerged with slow steps, accompanied by silent guards. The former master did not need to announce his presence. The Force itself seemed to contract around him. "You cannot escape me, Anakin," he said, his voice laden with authority and venom. Anakin wielded his lightsaber, its blue glow reflecting off the grass of Naboo. "Not anymore. I will never serve you again." Padme backed away, protecting her children against her chest, as she watched the confrontation unfold. Palpatine laughed, a deep laugh that echoed like thunder. "You are mine. You always have been. Until the end of time, it is my will that rules you." Anakin advanced, and the sabers did not meet, for Palpatine did not need to use a blade. From his twisted hands came bolts of energy, serpentines of pure hatred. The target was not Anakin, but Padme and the children. The lightning bolts cut through the air toward her, and a scream of horror echoed through the garden. Without thinking, Anakin ran, placing himself between the lightning and his family. Pain tore through his body, every inch burned by the energy of the dark side. His knees buckled, but he still stood firm as a barrier. "No!" he shouted, his body being consumed by the discharge. Padme's eyes filled with tears, and she cried out his name. Anakin fell to his knees, the saber slipping from his hand. The lightning ceased, but his skin was smoking, his muscles trembling. He fell to the ground, gasping for air, each breath a struggle. Before he could recover, he saw Palpatine advancing toward Padme and their children, his eyes hungry for power. "They are mine now," said the Sith, his cruel smile reflecting the darkness of the moment. Anakin reached out in desperation, but there was no strength left in his body. The world began to fade. His last vision was of Padme clutching their children close, retreating from the approaching shadow. Anakin closed his eyes, accepting that he had failed once again. "Padme, forgive me," he whispered, and darkness enveloped him. His heart beat one last time, and the Force seemed to hang in silence. But the cycle was not broken, and death was not the end. Time cruel pulled him back to where it all began. Suddenly, the screams were gone, Naboo was gone, and the painful breathing was replaced by the cold air of the office. Anakin opened his eyes and found himself once again on his knees before the Chancellor, his hands still trembling, as if the pain of sacrifice echoed. Palpatine leaned forward as before, about to utter the words that would condemn him. But this time Anakin looked up. The weight of repetition fell upon him like a revelation. He understood that no matter how hard he fought, the cycle would always bring him back there, kneeling before the man who stole everything from him. The memories of death on Naboo still burned in his mind, and he couldn't remain silent. His lips moved, not in hatred, not in supplication, but in recognition of the prison he was in. Then, with a look of fury, he whispered, "Palpatine." Anakin understood, kneeling before the Chancellor, that the Force had brought him back to this same moment countless times for one reason. His mission was not to serve, but to liberate. Balance would only come with the fall of the man who had poisoned the galaxy with lies. His heart burned, but not with hatred, with certainty. When Palpatine raised his hand to seal the pact, Anakin suddenly drew his lightsaber and, still on his knees, struck toward his enemy's chest. The Sith moved quickly, dodging by a hair's breadth, and the blade sliced through the air, illuminating the face marked by dark power. Palpatine recoiled, his eyes flashing with fury. "What are you doing, Skywalker?" His red lightsaber ignited, and the fight began. The blades cut through the air, thunderous flashes of light framing the room. Anakin rose and advanced with impetus, each blow laden with the memory of Mustafar, the pain of Naboo, and his love for Padme. But Palpatine knew tricks that no Jedi manual taught. With a treacherous twist, he wrenched the saber from Anakin's hand, and it fell to the floor, sliding to the edge of the room. The Sith's laughter echoed, deep and cruel. "You are nothing but a lost child, Skywalker. You belong to me." His deformed hands rose, and blue lightning bolts cut through the air, striking toward Anakin. The shock burned, his muscles contracted, and for a moment it seemed that fate would repeat its defeat. But something changed inside him. Amidst the pain, the image of Padme came to him clearly, with Luke and Leia in her arms, smiling at the life they carried. Anakin closed his eyes for a moment, and the Force responded. His hands, once only defensive, rose firmly against the storm. The bolts of energy met resistance, ricocheting off an invisible wall. Palpatine's eyes widened in surprise, for he had never seen such strength contained in a single being. "Impossible!" he shouted. But Anakin, now awake, did not yield. "For them, for her," he murmured, and released all the power he had stored, saying, "You underestimate my powers." The storm reversed. The lightning bolts returned to their sender, burning his body and tearing his cloak. Palpatine screamed in despair as the energy consumed him, staggering to the window. The Sith's body was thrown out, plummeting into the night of Coruscant, just as Mace Windu had once done. But this time there was no manipulation, only the end of a dark cycle. Anakin fell to his knees, exhausted, feeling that he had finally fulfilled what had always been destined for him. Anakin went to Padme. He hugged her tightly, breathing the relief of victory. "It's over. Palpatine no longer exists." She cried silently, understanding the weight he carried. Alongside Bail Organa, they organized the election of a new chancellor, returning the Republic to the people. The sun of Naboo shone that day as a sign of rebirth for the entire galaxy. But not all wounds could be healed. The death of Mace Windu weighed heavily on Anakin, a burden he could not ignore. So he decided to leave the Jedi Order, recognizing that his journey had been marked by choices that took him away from the traditional path. "I need to find my own balance," he told the council, which respected his decision, albeit with sadness. Padme remained by his side, and together they raised their twins amid hopes for a better future. But the Force does not remain silent in the face of inertia, and new challenges arose, threatening the galaxy once again. It was then that the Jedi sought him out again. "The Chosen One is still needed," they said, reminding him that balance is not achieved in a single act, but in a lifetime of choices. Anakin returned, not as the impulsive young man he once was, but as a man forged in struggles against himself and against the shadow of destiny. He did not return alone. At his side walked a new apprentice, one in whom he saw not only blood, but the continuation of hope. Before the council, he announced, "This is my Padawan Luke Skywalker,